Welcome to a webinar for church marketing and publicity, what they skipped in seminary. I think the fact that seminary classes, church sponsored workshops, and continuing education classes don't even mention promotions, marketing, public relations, or publicity is truly sad. This information gap severely limits a pastor's know how, knowledge, and skill set when it comes to communicating with their faith community. Plus, it restricts a church's ability to reach out to their community, wherever you're located, whether it's in a suburban area, a small town, or out in the open country. So let's start to correct that shortcoming. Hi, my name is Dave Schattinger. I'm a locally licensed part time pastor serving two churches in rural Missouri. When I started my pastoral journey, I had filled a pulpit a number of times over several years. I was also bivocational, working a full time job in addition to my pastoring and preaching duties. I was excited for the opportunity to serve. For most of my life, I had worshiped in large, big city churches, and just from my own experience, I knew that communication was a very important element in a church and congregational experience. As I took seminary based course of study classes, I realized that none of them touched on communication, except to provide a very limited, basic introduction to preaching. Like many of you, when I looked around my church community, the lack of ways to communicate with my congregation was painfully obvious. Out where my churches are located in the rolling prairie, there is no local TV news reporting, no daily newspaper, and there are very few local radio stations. The only means of direct promotional communication in the entire south end of the county is the 12-inch by 18-inch bulletin board inside the gas station convenience store on the other side of the river in the next county. In the trailer promoting this webinar, I described my conference wide search for information about successful rural churches with good communications programs. After years of asking, only one congregation out of the hundreds and hundreds of churches in this conference was ever brought forward as a positive example. When I talked to pastors at annual conference and in workshops, I realized there are potentially thousands of pastors with no working knowledge about promotions, marketing, communications, public relations, or publicity. They'd never had a course, a class, or a job that exposed them to what effective promotions honestly looks like, or how to implement any of the marketing tools or PR techniques at their disposal. My epiphany was that outside the relative safety of the sanctuary and the pulpit, most church leaders are not equipped to address the promotional and communication needs of their church, especially when it comes to reaching the local community. Just an FYI, public relations is also about communicating internally with the folks you see every week in worship, and it's a whole lot more than delivering a great sermon or a popular Bible study series. Eventually, I discovered a book about Christian leadership called Canoeing the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger from Fuller Theological Seminary. In the introduction, Bolsinger shares a frustration expressed by many pastors that their seminary training did not prepare them for the demands of church leadership in the 21st century. This simply added to my frustration about the gap in seminary education when it comes to communicating what you and your church have to offer to the community. Okay, so full disclosure. Prior to becoming a licensed part time pastor, I spent over 30 years teaching public relations courses and marketing communication classes. Plus, during most of that time, I also worked full time in corporate marketing departments, advertising agencies, and not for profit fundraising jobs. As a result, I know that church marketing and publicity is honestly much more than having a church secretary put an announcement in the Sunday bulletin or having a volunteer post something on the church's Facebook page and then brewing a pot of coffee right before the event starts. Given my background, you can probably understand why I would notice the lack of any type of promotions in religious educational settings. I also think it's regrettable because Major sections of the New Testament chronicle the adventures of one of the first PR experts in recorded history. The Apostle Paul effectively used a variety of PR techniques to deliver his message to specifically targeted audiences. The folks he sent letters to. On top of that, because every one of those early churches had a wide variety of unique individuals, diverse geographic locations, and very different issues, Paul adjusted his message to address their needs, which is a solid and effective PR technique. By any measure, Paul was quite successful at promoting his key concept, the gospel message of salvation through Jesus. Plus, as far as we know, he did not have reliable mail delivery or a stack of yard signs. We're also pretty sure he didn't own a laptop, a cell phone, an inkjet printer, a copy machine, nor did he have a church Facebook page. So, if the Apostle Paul accomplished great things using extremely basic first century communication tools, just think what you and your church volunteers could accomplish if you knew how to use the tools, techniques, and toys that we have at our disposal today. And helping you do that is my mission. One thing I mentioned in the promotional trailer was about what happens at a meeting when the idea of public relations or marketing is brought up and people react as if something magical has been invoked, like hallelujah, marketing, or they might view PR as some kind of distasteful but necessary evil. Most people think they know all about promotions because they've seen actors portray PR and marketing folks as everything from scam artists and hucksters to confidence men, spin doctors, and outright thieves. Plus, there's always someone who knows where to buy promotional pins or t shirts. I have to say that honestly, effective church marketing and publicity actually involves a whole lot more than a giveaway with a slogan printed on it. This type of response always reminds me of the comedy bit where a guy steps out of the crowd and says, "Sure, I know how to fly a plane. I watched Top Gun 6 times." If you want to get your message in front of everyone who could possibly be interested, but you don't have an unlimited budget, or you're like most of us and you honestly don't have any promotional budget at all, there are some basics you need to be aware of to make sure you're on the right track. At the most basic level, communicating anything about you, your church's program starts with a very uncomplicated template from your high school English class. You'll probably recognize what I'm talking about, the 5 W's and the H. What, where, when, why, who, and how. Simple enough, but forget one and your message will be misunderstood. Skip two or more and your information is going to get ignored. Whether you're making a flyer or a brochure, writing a press release, planning an event, or designing a full blown publicity campaign, the 5 W's and the H are essential. Plus, unless you honestly have all the relevant information and tie it together in a strategic communication plan, you are not truly ready to begin. It's kind of interesting to me to note that the field of public relations grew out of the journalism profession after World War II. Today, it covers everything from writing a simple press release or planning a single event to working with mass media and online platforms, as well as image and reputation management, campaign development, and crisis response. Even in this day and age where every organization and most people in your community have a Facebook page and or a website or a Twitter account, the basics from journalism still apply. So for every event or program or even a short press release promoting any one of those activities, you have to start with the 5 W's and the H. Okay, so this is where you get to do more than just sit there and absorb what I'm talking about. Please grab a piece of paper and something to write with, or if you insist on being 21st century chic, open a separate window in your laptop with a blank word processing document. That way you can take a few notes. The first thing I want you to do is write down the word what at the top of the page. We'll get to the other 4 W's and the H in a moment. Now, think about an event, an activity, or a program that's being talked about or planned in your church. The size and scope don't really matter. Pretty much anything will work. A fundraising luncheon, a rummage sale or bazaar, a special musical event, a youth community service project, whatever. Write the name or title next to the word what. Then write sentence, a one sentence summary about the event, activity, or program. Just one sentence is all you need right now. You can come back and fill in other details later. Next, write the word when and jot down the date you expect it to happen. It doesn't matter if it's set in stone or not, this is just an exercise. At some point in your planning process, you will need to look at the date, consider all the details that have to be completed, and decide if there's honestly enough time to get everything prepared. But that's a discussion for another day and time. I also cover much more in event planning in the Church Marketing and Publicity online course. Now, write the word where and then describe the location, the church basement, the fellowship hall, the parking lot, maybe a local park. Again, all you need at this point is just a few words, a clause, a short sentence. Just write a short note about where it might be held. The next W is who. So write that word down. Now, this might seem really easy, clear, and obvious, but who can be tricky. Who do you want to inform about your activity, event, or program? The first group that comes to mind is probably the set of folks that you want to attend your activity, event, or program. So write them down as a group, like kids, adults, families, women, young mothers, retirees, or whatever descriptive label you want to use. For instance, are you hoping to attract families with grade school age children? Or are you hoping to reach just adult women, just adult men, only teenagers? Also, what age group or groups might be in your target audience? Are there any other distinctive characteristics you're looking for? Let me give you an example. When I was working for a hospital, we put together a health fair and bought a mailing list. We knew from research that women make the healthcare decisions in families. We defined our audience as women between the ages of 25 and 65 with household incomes above a certain level. Our strategy was to target families with enough income that the family was likely to have health insurance. You're not necessarily going to go to that extent in your planning or detailing, primarily because you're not likely to go out and buy a mailing list. But you might define a geographic area around your church where the travel time to your church is convenient and reasonable. Now, here's where the who on this list can have another factor or two that you need to consider. Do you strictly want to attract current, active church members? Do you want to reach inactive members? Or are you hoping to attract community members who may have no connection to your church at all? The question of church members versus community members not only implies two distinctly different groups with different interests and needs, but it's also likely to require two different approaches in your promotional efforts. Reaching and attracting community members may require slightly different messages and forms of communicational and promotional efforts. If you think about it, there are certain advantages to communicating with church members. They can be handed a flyer or pick up a bulletin insert. Plus, you undoubtedly have their home and email addresses in your church records. However, if all you ever do is communicate with the members, the benefits of this webinar and the Church Marketing Publicity online course are going to be very limited. Who can also have another category, such as the sponsoring group, especially if it's the youth group, or some other internal circle or club that's benefiting from the activity, or if you're teaming up with an outside of the church organization. Some people may be interested or attracted simply by knowing who is sponsoring the event or activity. If you're planning a musical event or a performance by someone the community might recognize, that gives you one additional who to include on your list of important information. This type of who also relates directly back to and gives you more substance to answer the question, what? The point here is that it's easily more than one answer to the question about who. Next, write down the word why. When it comes to why, the why of your activity, The answer may or may not be something you can use in your promotional efforts. If the attendees will learn something or be able to take away something of value, or the eventual goal is to fund a specific organization, group of people, or a philanthropic cause, then you have a built in reason for folks to want to support, attend, engage, or otherwise participate. If your answer to the question of why is because we did it last year or because we've done it for the past decade and for no other reason, then it might be time to rethink what you're doing, or at least look for some interesting or engaging aspect of the event to help grab attention. Your answer to the question, why, has the potential to drive a very strong promotional message and attract a lot of attention from your target audience. Finally, write down the word how. How is where you explain the details and specifics that people will need to participate or get involved with your organization. Depending on the topic, you might explain how the activity, event, or program came about within your organization. This is also where you can tell folks how to place reservations or get tickets if those are necessary. The how section is also where you put any additional important piece of information that someone who wants to participate needs to know. This is not where you describe how the rummage sale tables are organized or how you coordinated with local officials for parking and traffic flow challenges. Now, after laying out the 5 W's and the H, you have just started on your promotional journey. And yes, I said started. There are several more critical steps and essential details you will need to address before you actually are ready to implement your activity, event, or program. At some point in the planning process, you must write and edit a real, honest, and engaging message to use in your promotional efforts. In a sense, it's a summary, but it's also a concise and persuasive message that will hopefully attract people to your activity. You will also need to develop an unvarnished and honest understanding of your organization's current public image, along with identifying what resources and support exist within your organization and your community. This is just some of the preliminary groundwork or research you'll need to do. I cover that and a whole lot more in the Church Marketing and Publicity online course. I do feel the need to acknowledge that there's one incredibly dynamic and persuasive promotional tactic available to everyone, no matter what resources are at your disposal, and that's word of mouth. However, word of mouth is notoriously difficult, if not impossible, to control. So engage it sparingly and with great caution and use as much planning as possible. Limit what's released by word of mouth and keep your ear to the ground for the possibility that your message may get warped or misinterpreted and need to be corrected in some way, shape, or form. There's also a real positive hiding in plain sight that you can take advantage of with a little effort and limited out of pocket expense. According to extensive and repeated research, the consuming public views public relations messaging as having more value than advertising and other forms of marketing. In other words, people believe news reports and stories they see in the press as more significant and more worthwhile than commercials and advertisements. Even if the newspaper is a weekly one, a couple of counties away, many older adults do read what appears in print. Folks are also more likely to read a handout or a newsletter from your church, especially because they trust the source of the information. I also need to make a point that a lot of folks think publicity is free. It's not. While the media doesn't charge to run your story, even if there is some place close that will cover it. Information for your promotions must be collected, organized, edited, approved, and distributed. And flyers won't attach themselves to bulletin boards, and yard signs don't plant themselves in lawns. You also have to consider the cost of actually producing and printing flyers, posters, banners, yard signs, or whatever else you're creating. At the same time, these hidden expenses are always less expensive than the cost of advertising. You must honestly put some deliberate thought and analysis into your efforts so that they will be strategic in research, planning, writing, and implementation. Now, you might ask what I mean by strategic. For starters, everything in your plan must build on other parts and always focus on the goals and objectives. And I do get into that in greater detail in the Church Marketing and Publicity online course. A critical element of your effort is the way you explain your concept, describe your event, or relate your story. It must be fresh, relevant, timely, and interesting, whether you're hosting the first, the second, or the 16th annual Church Bazaar or Lord's Acre. You must come up with a grabber headline for your flyers, yard signs, bulletin inserts, or for use in that attention grabbing headline on the press release you're sending to the closest newspaper. Remember that competition for everyone's attention is epic, distracting, and overwhelming. And there are always dozens of other interesting stories, groups, and causes contending for the attention of the media folks as well as for the attention of everyone in your community every single day. Simultaneously, you need to realize that publicity is earned. The news media does not have to cover your story. However, when the media does report a story, their coverage becomes an implicit third party endorsement for your event. That's why you want them to cover it and why you want to get your information out to them in the best format possible. You see, there are actually a number of techniques and formats you can use to promote your church. And yes, I do cover this in greater depth in the Church Marketing and Publicity online course. Let me take a minute and share a quick story that describes how all this can come together. Actually, much better than I ever anticipated. A couple of years ago, I joined a local volunteer community chorus that puts on a choral program twice a year. They invite a different high school or junior high singing group to participate in each program. The combination of the groups makes for a very broad potential audience and widens the program's appeal. In other words, the who question has several responses. The promotional efforts for the choral program involve a very, very small budget, with chorus members and school group members posting flyers throughout the community and personally handing invitation cards to friends, family, and acquaintances. The chorus director writes a press release about the coming concert and sends it to the local weekly newspaper along with a photo from the previous year's performance. My professional experience told me that newspapers, even small town papers, normally take a press release and a photo, and if they do anything more than just list the concert in the community events column, they might run a short story after the concert is over. That's nice, but it doesn't do anything to attract folks to your event or program, which is what you're really trying to do. What I witnessed from my community chorus was very different. Since our director writes a very interesting account of what is planned, especially what's different and unique about the planned performance, he includes as much detail as possible about the school group. As a result, our small town weekly newspaper always publishes a good sized photo of the chorus and an article about the upcoming concert. I am amazed every time because each concert ends up with a story promoting it and running just a few days in advance of the concert. We couldn't ask for better publication timing. Our director's attention to details, extensive strategic planning, good writing, editing, plus timely delivery of the press release information a full 2 to 3 weeks before the concert produces an incredible result. As I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, you've got more tools and technology than the Apostle Paul could have even imagined. Your challenge is to use them effectively and efficiently and strategically, and this is what I want to help you learn to do. One of the key things that many folks say is that you'll need to have a social media presence. And they might imply that's all you really need. That's kind of like saying the only thing you need to be a good pastor is a very loud speaking voice. There's honestly a whole lot more to it than that. Social media can be very useful. Unfortunately, many church pastors and their parishioners have little exposure to social media except to see what the kids and grandkids are doing on Facebook. If that's you, and even if you're serving the smallest rural congregation, you should do a little experiment. Gauge the unbelievable persuasiveness and pervasiveness of social media. Ask this question to your congregation. Is anyone following the local grade school, junior high, or high school's webpage, or the parent organization's Facebook and Pinterest pages? I expect the response will immediately convince you just how pervasive and potentially important social media is today. However, it is just one important tactic in your promotional toolkit. So, as we consider the subject of church promotions, I have an odd question for you. When it comes to your church promotions, are you a ninja, a butterfly, or a Neanderthal? Here's what I mean by that. When it comes to promoting your church and its activities, are you able to stealthily move into the marketplace to surgically and efficiently deliver your message to the correct and strategically targeted audience, much like a ninja would do? Or do you randomly flit from one fun and neat promotional idea to the next cute promotional effort as things randomly pop up, kind of like a butterfly in a flower garden? Or do you pound your way into people's awareness, much like a Neanderthal using expensive and gaudy displays or advertising that grabs attention, but may also distract and confuse folks? If you are the big dog in your community and can get away with a Neanderthal approach, I'm happy for you. But an overwhelming majority of us do not have that luxury. We must be extremely cost conscious, efficient, and effective. Building a strategic communication plan can help you pursue ninja status in your promotional efforts. Whatever your level of understanding and usage, social media has become the darling of every group trying to communicate with neighbors, prospects, consumers, faith groups, non members, whatever. Social media is the newest shiny tool in the world of promotions. I'll grant you it's an important and essential tool. However, it is just one more device in your overstuffed promotional toolkit. On top of that, the church, with its internal organizations, clubs, and groups, has been around for a long time, multiple generations in many communities. What goes on inside the church is undoubtedly well known and understood by the members. But outside the walls, in the community, what you do and what you stand for as an organization may be a real mystery. Plus, as the marketing world looks at our churches, we may just be trying to rejuvenate a very, very mature product. We also may need to re educate a whole segment of our local population. This is exciting, but if you don't have the experience or information to do all this effectively, it can become an overwhelming challenge. Ultimately, your promotional message must honestly involve some deliberate thought to be able to describe, promote, and share an interesting, attractive, and engaging purpose for your event or activity or program. To communicate effectively, you must understand who your target audience is. You have to honestly and courageously review and understand the current public image and reputation of your church and congregation. You also need to recognize what resources exist within your organization to support and carry out your efforts. At the same time, promotional efforts are usually only successful and effective if a basically positive image already exists and there is a functional product or service to promote. Your church should already, hopefully, have a head start in the areas of image, reputation, and mission. Making sure you can fully answer the questions posed by the 5 W's and the H is a critical starting point. But there's a lot more to know and understand so you can be as effective as possible when you promote your church and its activities. Your efforts must also include strategic research, planning, writing, production, implementation, and follow up. All of this is why the Church Marketing and Publicity webinar was created, along with the online Church Marketing and Publicity course. It's also why I wrote the book Promotions in a PR Wilderness. If you would like to start filling in that enormous informational gap, please join me on this journey. Click on the link and sign up for the Church Marketing and Publicity online course. Also, please do me a favor and share the link to the trailer and to this webinar with your fellow pastors as well as your church leaders. If you want to see what topics I'm going to cover in the online course, there's also a list on my Facebook page as well as in the online course website. If you want to skip ahead and see what I have to say on the topics in the course, you can go ahead to the course website, my Facebook page, or Amazon.com and order promotions in a PR wilderness. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you in the Church Marketing and Publicity online course.